I'm David Marquet, and this is What the Speak podcast.
What the Speak, episode 27. Come now, darling.
Do you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch? If not, these expert discussions and insider tips can help you right now, today. Welcome to the What the Speak podcast. I'm your host, Brian Kelly.
Struggling with feeling comfortable in front of an audience when you present? Or maybe you're confident, but you have difficulty stumbling over filler words like and ah. Well, you can start kicking ass today by signing up for our weekly VIP updates. As a bonus, you'll also receive 11 free tips that will uncover 6 psychological secrets to public speaking, plus 5 tips on how to stop using filler words. Go to whatthespeak.com/VIP. David Marquet, are you ready to answer the question, what the speak?
I am. Bring it on.
All right. Well, David, I know that you're a former captain of a submarine in the Navy, and you have a best-selling book about leadership based on those experiences in the Navy. But let's hear it directly from you. Can you briefly tell us about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I had this experience as the captain of a submarine, which wasn't what I expected. I rose up through the ranks in the Navy because I was really good at telling people what to do and really good at doing what I was told. And I had this experience as the captain where I realized that's not what we really want out of leadership. What we really want is for people to think. And so much of leadership is about getting people to do stuff. And the way you get people to think is by giving control, not taking control. And that essentially flips the whole thing on its head. So through a series of experiments and learning from the crew and kind of going through this process together, we thought we got pretty successful at flipping this whole model on its head. And as a result, we created more leaders than any other submarine that there's record of, which is something, of course, is very gratifying to me. But I think more importantly, it means that the lives of those people are fuller. They're contributing more, they're finding their passion more, and all those kind of things.
Well, it's a fascinating story, David, and it would be fun to dive into that, but I really want to zero in on your experiences speaking about this topic. So what I'd like to ask you next is, aside from this topic of leadership, is that the only thing that you talk about when you go and you speak in front of audiences, or are there any other topics that you discuss?
No, pretty much leadership is it, but leadership is everything, right? I could we could talk about how the orange production is in Florida, and I could connect it to leadership, I'm pretty sure, because it's all about stories. So once you kind of open it up to that way of thinking, you can talk about anything. But for me, I almost jokingly tell my wife, I get paid to tell stories, which is sort of true.
Right.
But it's important. There's storytelling, then there's storytelling, and I've learned that you want one kind of storytelling better than another.
Well, I've seen you speak, and you are a good storyteller, I have to say. So, David, I would love to talk about your origin story, particularly in the area of speaking. So how exactly did you get into professional speaking? Was it just around, writing this book, or were you involved in public speaking in some way, shape, or form in the military, or even before that? I'd love to hear the story.
Well, we all give speeches in the military, but most of them are terrible, and we're subjected to terrible speeches, and make people admirals and captains, and then all of a sudden they think they're magic wand, we're a great speaker, and then nothing could be further from the truth. So there was always this, a smoldering frustration with having to hear these terrible speeches. I got in a very limited way before I wrote the book. And in fact, it was through a speech that I met Clint Greenleaf, who published my book. And I got connected from another friend anyway. So I was doing some very limited speaking. Most of it was unpaid, just trying to tell my story. And just by luck, one of the guys in the audience, this was a speech to EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and one of the guys in the audience says, well, I'm saying, well, I was like, what do you do? I'm meeting 3 people at the cocktail hour. I said, what do you do? And it's like, well, I own a publishing company. I founded a publishing company. I said, well, that's funny because I'm looking for someone to publish my book. And he said, well, let me hear your story first, and then we'll go from there. So when I was speaking, I could see him in the audience, and he was nodding. So I kind of knew I was going on the right track.
Nice.
But that's how it started. But then when the book, I think it's a very powerful combination. I'm not sure how you sell books if you don't have a speaking thing, and I'm not sure how you get invited to speak anywhere if you don't have a book. So for me, the two things really work very well. I mean, so there's some amazing speakers who don't need a book, and there's some amazing writers who don't know how to speak, and that works. But I think for most of the rest of us, telling the story in writing, telling the story verbally, there's a synergy and the audience, and there's a powerful audience connection there.
So the thing that I'm wondering is, because again, I've seen you speak in person, and you have a unique style, of course, but there's some things that you do that I wondered, do you do these things intuitively, or have you worked with a coach? I'd love to hear about that.
Okay, so I have I work with a coach. I took some singing lessons. And I know of some speakers who've done things like ballet. Those are probably useful. I am totally uncoached, or I'm probably uncoachable as a speaker. And most of the advice that I see on speaking doesn't ring true for me. The most important thing is just to be yourself. You don't want to take a formula and put it on you. You want to be your best self. And most people, when they are their best, most authentic self, when you drop all the pretense, they're pretty good. They're funny, or they're serious, or they are the way they need to be. And so when we start, like when I started giving speeches, my first few speeches were terrible, and I still cringe when I watch myself on video, but you have this script in your head, and you want to say, well, I'm going to say this, I want to say that. First of all, I never go with a script. You can write one out if you want, but certainly don't have it in front of you.
Right.
But what happens is the audience doesn't know what's on your script. So the audience doesn't know you skipped line 7, 8, 9, all right? They don't know. And I would go, I meant to say that. And you know what? No one cares. No one knows. And so just focus. And if you focus on the message and you focus on the audience and not on yourself, so that's like an inward focus. Like, I should have said that's the wrong way to focus. You focus on what is helpful for these people. What's going to be interesting, entertaining for a little while. Depends how long you're doing it. For 4 hours, you can't be entertaining. You want to have more content. But, if it's a 45-minute keynote, just be yourself. So that's it. Like, I never thank anybody, right? Well, I think that, like, Brian, when you introduced me, I said, thank you, Brian. That's it. I don't say, well, thank you, Mr. CEO, General, whatever, Mr. Skip all that crap. No one cares about that. And never tell a joke. If you want to be funny in the context of the talk. Don't tell jokes, because it just never worked for me.
Yep.
So I just start telling a story. The very first words out of my mouth typically are the first lines of a story. Like, for example, some person, and it's usually a person, right? So-and-so woke up with a headache. And those are the first words out of them. And the people are like, oh, well, I wonder what's going to happen here. Not, well, hey, let me tell you a story. So-and-so woke up with a headache. No, just tell them the story, right? They appreciate their time. So anyway, so that's one thing I learned. I can't remember what your question was either.
Well, no, I think, you touched upon basically, this beginning story of how you got involved with speaking.
Yeah.
And the next thing I did want to ask was how, you alluded it to a bit, but how did you struggle, or what was a specific thing that you struggled with? And maybe it's something that you still are wrestling with right now, but I'd love to hear from you. One area that you've had to improve, or that you feel you need to continue to improve upon.
Yeah. So good. good writing, as we all know, comes from good thinking, right?
Yeah.
If the thinking is muddied, if the thinking is confused, the writing will be, it doesn't matter how many editors you hire, the writing will be crap. So it all comes from the thinking. And I think the same is true of good speaking and good storytelling.
Yep.
So for me, it's almost like you don't really know what your story is. Like you could tell your story in multiple different ways, or most people have several stories inside of them. And which stories are the most powerful ones that the audience is going to connect with? And then sometimes I try to put a little structure behind it, like, okay, this story is inward facing, this story is outward facing, this story is very individualistic. I'm talking about like so-and-so woke up with a headache. It's about a single, or maybe this story is a statistic, X percent. So it's like, and then sort of try and bounce around between those boxes. This story is inspirational. This story is very sort of action oriented. Do this. Like when you go to work tomorrow, don't say this, say this. So, because people get differently. One of the most fun things I did was, and I think you might have been at this speech, was in Orlando, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Was Dan Pink was before me, and he had talked about the Pixar storyline.
Exactly.
He said every Pixar story goes like this: once upon a time, there was a blank. Every day, blank happened. Then one day, blank, and because of that, blank. Okay, so that was the Pixar story. So the audience was exposed to the Pixar story.
Yep.
And so when I came on stage, I said, okay, I'm going to give a free book to the first three people who write because I'm going to tell a story, and I want you to write my Pixar story.
Yep.
And so I kind of fell into this, bowl of cherries, like I fell into the other one. And it was great because now everyone's paying attention, right? They're trying to, and what I ended up with was about 100 cards that had what they heard my story in a very simple, framework. So there was structure to it, but it was very interesting to me, all the variations of what people heard. Mm-hmm. Like I would have written one thing. I said, my story is, once upon a time as a naval officer, every day he gave orders. One day he gave an order that couldn't have been followed, and his crew tried to follow it. Because of that, he stopped giving orders, and because of that, people became empowered, and boom, end of story. Something like that. That's what I would have written. But I had all these other multiple perspectives, and it really opened my eyes that, you think what you're saying is perfectly the most brilliantly clear thing in the universe. And it wasn't that they were wrong in their interpretations. It's just that they were looking at it in their way, and it was really interesting. So that helped me get over this fear of saying the exact script that I had in my head.
Yeah. So basically, you've kind of learned from that experience, being able to see your story through other people's eyes, and sounds like probably refining that a little bit more as part of your natural process of getting up in front of an audience and speaking.
Right. Yeah, right. So then you say, oh, okay, that no one mentioned that brilliant story I told about the, main lube oil pump. No one cared about that. But they remembered was the story about the sailor who, got left in Mexico. Right.
Yep. That's an interesting exercise, because I know I've talked with a lot of folks on this show over the course of this year that have really singled out this notion or this idea of, you got to make it about the audience. This isn't about you. This is about the audience and what they need and how you can help them right in that moment of need or the thing that they're struggling with.
Right.
But you've got a unique take on it, because you're saying, don't only do that, but hear your story through their words, and then be able to internalize that and make adjustments to what it is that you're presenting, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I would get upset because it's a harsh world, right? As you know, you're a speaker. It's a harsh world. You get 100, you speak in front of 100 people, you get 100 votes, and you get like 3 people will say terrible,
Yep.
You get a lot of, people say, oh, it was great, whatever. And it's like, terrible? Really? Like, horrible? Really? Why didn't you just leave? And it would bother me a lot. Maybe I'm just insensitive in my old age, but now it doesn't really bother me as much. Anyway, if we have time, I have a funny story from a speaking event where I got one vote like that. And I know exactly who it was because I was a jerk to this one lady in the chat.
All right. Well, we've got in our section that we wrap up with, I've got a funny story. So that'll be where you can tell that story.
Okay.
All right. So let's switch the focus a little bit of our discussion. I want to talk about your unique perspective coming from the military. So the question is, how is speaking in front of a crowd that's in a ballroom different than giving a presentation when you were a military officer? I'd love to kind of walk through that because you did say before that, you're in the military, you're an officer, you give a lot of speeches. What's the difference between those two things?
Look, they don't need to be there, right? The military audience is coerced, right? When the admiral would come to base, they would say every submarine needs to send 20 people, not 19, because then there would be empty seats in the auditorium, and we can't have empty seats. So the admiral comes and he sees a full auditorium, and he thinks he's the most brilliant person, and we tell people to clap, and they clap and whatever. I'm in New York now, so my wife got tickets to go see Letterman, and they're like, look, there's no laugh track. You guys have to clap. They kind of like beat us up. You got to clap. They say, clap now, think about it later. Well, that's kind of how it is, right? You get to clap. Hey, it was great. Like in the business world, these guys they're very, you got to respect their time. Their time is very important. Every human's time is important. If they want to stand up and walk out, they can walk out and play with their cell phone. So here's the thing, right? You got these guys would say, hey, everyone, please put away your cell phone, blah, blah, blah. I never say that.
Right.
In fact, like I'm the opposite guy. I say, oh, by the way, if you get bored, start playing with your cell phone. I go to a speaker and say, look, if I could give you some sort of a magic wand where you would know where the people were starting to not be interested in your talk, how much would you pay for that? And they go, oh, that'd be really awesome. I'd love to have that. Well, you get it for free. Just tell the people, look, if you're bored, just play with your phone. Right? So exactly. I'm like the opposite guy. So all that, and the other thing is don't tell people what to do. My whole thing is about giving control. You are in control. If the most valuable thing for you in your time is to play with your phone, play with your phone. I don't care. I'm already get paid. Right?
Yep.
So respect people's time. I don't know how I got off onto that, but
no, I think that we were talking about the differences between the military and an audience. I guess the other thing I'm curious about is who's a tougher crowd? If you were speaking in front of military officers or business executives, who's a tougher crowd?
Well, the business executives are. I mean, maybe if we actually asked the military officers what they thought of the speech, they'd be a tough crowd too, but we don't ever ask them. We don't care. We just tell them to show up and go away.
Gotcha.
So
follow the orders.
Follow orders, right? Clap at the end.
Cool. Well, David, we're going to wrap it up. We've got our rapid fire Q&A portion of the discussion, and there's 5 questions that we're going to quickly go through. So first thing that comes to your mind, would love to hear it. The first thing is, do you prefer to present with slides or no slides?
I like slides. But all my slides are pictures. I have very few words, and they just help tell the story.
I remember you were poking fun at yourself, your graphic design skills in one presentation.
Yeah. I use those cheesy Microsoft pre-made, explosions and stuff.
The thing is, though, when people walk out of hearing you speak, they're not talking about your graphics. They're talking about the content that you gave. So
right.
Yeah.
Right. So pictures are good. Words are not good.
Yep. All right. So who's a speaker that inspires you the most and why?
I love watching Simon. He's a friend of mine, so this is I've gotten to know him. But Simon Sinek. I love watching that guy. I've gone to some of those things in person, and it's like he has no slides. Okay, he has a little flipboard. He makes a little cheesy little sketch on the flipboard, and half the time I don't think he knows where he's going when he starts. But it's the ideas are so compelling. He's so genuine. He's so like present in the room with the audience that there's this power, and it's not also. I mean, he's up there, like he's like I'm here on the food chain of speakers, and he's like I'd go higher, but I get out of the camera, right? But he's so, it's just like, you know, he's there with the audience, right? A guy asks a question, he like goes right to the guy, like answers the question. So I love the way he moves on stage, and
he's good. He is good.
He's there, and it's not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something to aspire to, right?
Something to aspire to.
All right. So now here's your time to tell the funny story. So I want to know, what's the funniest thing that's happened to you when you've given a presentation?
Well, I guess the funniest things that have happened to me have all been accidents. So for example, I get up on stage, and like the clicker doesn't work for some reason. And in fact, I think this happened with your group, or the mic.
Oh, the microphone, yeah.
And like, actually, that was the second time that happened. So, but you know, and I'll just like something will pop in, some irreverent will pop into my head. Like, well, this is like when this clicker didn't work. I said, well, this is where my wife says, you know, you can run a nuclear submarine, you can't make PowerPoint work, you know, something like that. So there are a series of things like that. I was doing a talk for a conference, we'll just say, and it was over 2 days, and there was like 6 breakout speakers. I was one of the breakout speakers, and each breakout speaker had to give their talk 6 times, 3 times on the first day, 3 times on the second day.
Yep.
So the first day, like I'm walking around, like I'm like, I got my military retirement, so this doesn't work out, you know, like whatever. So I'm just trying to have a fun time and meet people. So I'm walking around and meeting the other breakout speakers, because the main group is still finishing their main keynote. They're going to come to our rooms in a minute. And everyone's like, you know, whatever, who are you, dude? Go away. And I'm like, genuinely, hey, I hope you have a good time. And they're like, whatever. So the day goes on, and my talk was going pretty well, and the buzz was, you know, it was like the best talk. And so the next morning, you know, same deal, you know, I'm setting up, and like they're all now coming into my room. It's like, oh wow, I hear your things. I'm like, dude, you had no time for me yesterday. You know, of course I was gracious, but it was kind of funny. So at this thing, so then I was standing in the chow line. This is the thing, we're standing in the chow line, and I have the mic on, and I asked the lady behind me, I said, well, who have you heard? And she's like, well, I've heard da 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 da. I said, like, what about you? And I said, oh, I've heard that submarine guy like 4 times. And she goes, oh. And then she looked at on my mic and said, oh, you are the submarine guy? I go, yeah. And then, so then I get the grades like 3 weeks later, and I have all these really great grades. I have this one grade. One person gave me a 1. The lowest grade you can get. And I know it was that lady in the lunch line. So don't be mean to people. It's just not the right way to be, and they'll get you back, and you deserve to have that come up. And so
the mic is always on, right?
Yeah, the mic is always, yeah, no, it's just like, my problem, this was a real problem. Okay, my problem was everyone started telling me, oh, your thing's going so well, blah, 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 blah. And instead of being the genuine, the way I started, it got back into my head. And I ended up it turned into a jerk. That's all it took to turn me into a jerk. And it took this lady to, you know, to help me see a better way.
No, that's good.
Yeah. So I thank her.
All right. Well, 2 last final quick questions. We've got, how big of an impact has speaking had on your career? Obviously, it sounds like it's a big part in tandem with you being a best-selling author, but what's the impact been for you personally?
Well, first of all, I would be nowhere. I would be like, I would sell 0 books. Not like 5. I'd be like 0, I think, without the speaking. Like my mom would buy my book, and that would be it. So first, in terms of getting the message out, it's everything. And then the other thing is you continue to refine the message. You can continue to refine understanding, the interaction with real people. And I was in the Navy, so I travel all over the world. Yep. But just traveling around the country now in the world, and I've given talks now in eight countries, it's a big world. And there are a lot of people out there doing a lot of amazingly creative and cool things. And every day that I go out there and I interact with these people, it's like, what do you do? Like, whatever, we, invented Jell-O or something. It's like amazing stuff. It's like, it continuously amazes me. And it just makes you feel good that, there's hope.
That's good. All right. So here we are. Last one. What is one piece of advice that you wish you had received when you first started speaking?
Well, I received a lot of advice, and my problem was that I didn't heed it. And so one of the pieces of advice was to be yourself, and I didn't hear it, and so it wasn't like I wish I'd listened to that advice. Yep. And so I tried to create. I watched a lot of TED Talks and said, I'm going to be like those guys. And you can learn stuff, but you're not going to be like those. You're not going to be one. You're not going to be whoever, you're not going to be one of those guys. Okay, you can learn from their things, which is good, but you're going to be you. So perfect. So I was just a little deaf there.
No, that's good. Well, I would say that you've finally mastered that. You are who you are when you're on stage.
Yeah. That's how it is, man.
All right. Well, David, we'll have links to your website, your social media profiles, as well as your book in the show notes over at whattospeak.com. I want to sincerely thank you for sharing your time, your expertise, and insight into your story as someone who truly kicks ass when they speak, present, or pitch.
Thank you very much.
If you liked what today's guest had to share in our discussion, you may want to grab an audio copy of their latest book for free by going to WTSaudiobook.com. That's WTSaudiobook.com.
All right, here we go with the outro.
Thanks so much for joining us today on What to Speak. Be sure to visit whattospeak.com for show notes on every episode and to sign up for our email list to stay updated on resources that'll help you kick ass when you speak, present, or pitch.